there's a recognition that all companies are ultimately affected by climate change, even if not indirectly. And I think the reality is there's many different types of risks. Even if they aren't exposed to, say, physical risks, they may face transition and market risks, so changes to consumer demand and changes in policy and legislation relating to a low carbon economy. And we always advise our clients it's worth kind of mapping out these risks. Even if it's not super detailed, intensive, it's just good to know what they are. And we're seeing the direction is towards transparency. So more companies are being required to report on climate risk, and now we're seeing this focus on nature impacts and dependencies with the Task Force for Nature-related Financial Disclosures. So having this sort of understanding early on will really mean that companies are better positioned to succeed in the future. And we sort of see a future by 2030 where all companies are aware of the risks and ultimately kind of embedding impact into the heart of their company.
I mean, it's going to be unique to every company, but the first thing is, take stock as best you can, scope 1, 2, 3. Even though we don't have perfect guidance on scope 3, the majority of our emissions are actually upstream and downstream. So we've done our best to figure out what those are and where they come from. We've also started an initiative that might be useful for others, is when we have some new suppliers come on, we actually have introduced a new thing called a sustainability exhibit for suppliers to Salesforce. Since most of our emissions are scope 3, it's a process where we ask new suppliers or existing suppliers to actually estimate their scope 1, 2, 3 and show us a plan to reduce it, and also come up with high quality offsets for the unabatables. So that's a tool that we're really proud of and we're rolling out, and it's a nice way to kind of turn what's a CSR issue into a financial issue. It's part of the contracting process. I think the key thing is really to publicly state where your emissions are, where they're coming from, and then what you're doing very specifically and where you are on that road. The transparency is the most important thing. Companies, of course, can take the easy route and just offset. And I think since this is not really a compliance market, the best that we can ask companies to do is be very transparent about their emissions, what they're doing to abate. So really seeing detailed plans. There's a couple of things that come to mind. One is the more transparency, we've already said it, the better. I think a lot of companies are taking science-based targets, which is it's a great process. It's a great institution, and it's got some very good elements. One of the problem that's lacking though is it's difficult to make any claims in the short term. So if you're a company and you do everything right, you've got a sustainability value, you've got all your employees working on it, you're transparently reporting your emissions, scope 1, 2, 3, you're doing the best you can in 3, you've got plans to reduce all your key sectors, you're trying to find the highest quality offsets, you're supplementing that with philanthropy, you should be able to say something. You should say something to inspire others, to tell your shareholders, to tell your employees what you're doing. We're trying our best to just communicate everything that we know about our emission portfolio and what we're doing. So we list all the tree projects we support. We have a very detailed stakeholder impact report that goes through a lot of the initiatives that we're supporting. And so everything's out there for people to criticize for us or to compliment or to join us. But that's our approach, is just doing the best we can and communicating it really clearly and simply, ideally.
We have many crises, and it's not just a climate crisis. And the two big ones we focus on are climate and biodiversity, and of course they're interlinked. And as John also said, it's carbon's hard to get your head around, but biodiversity is even more so. But the really kind of interesting thing is 90% of the conversation is around carbon and climate, and so there's a real underrepresentation to the biodiversity crisis. And so we were attracted to nature-based solutions because they tackle climate, they tackle biodiversity, and they support those people at the forefront of climate change. And I think the the stat that we sometimes talk about is, if as a as a world population we get to net zero by say 2050, if we haven't fixed the biodiversity crisis, then we're still toast. So investment in nature is needed now.